Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Lisa C. Today, female entrepreneurs continue to face an uphill battle compared to their male counterparts, making their business consistently profitable. A recent study published by American Express Open found that the number of women-owned businesses increased 21% over the past 5 years to almost 13 million. But women business owners, on average, are barely hitting the six-figure mark. It's no secret that female entrepreneurs need to make more money and are dealing with health challenges from the hustle and grind. A woman actually died from overwork, just trying to reach her financial mark. Women aren't achieving as much financial success because many lack visibility, and our guest is going to talk about that today. Today's guest, Melanie Benson, says, you need to be rewired for wealth. Melanie is the CEO of Profit Amplifier and the host of the highly successful podcast, Amplify Your Success. If you are a female entrepreneur who makes a living sharing your knowledge, experience, or expertise, if you desire to cancel the cash flow crisis, today's guest can help you reposition yourself as an influential expert. You're in for a treat today. Welcome to the show, Melanie Benson. Hi, Melanie.
Hello, Lisa C.
Thanks. We're excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, before we delve in, let's just refer back to that statistic I shared in the intro about the number of women-owned businesses increasing to almost 13 million, but many are barely hitting the six-figure mark. Melanie, do you think it's a lack of startup capital or a lack of confidence? What's stalling women? Here's a better question. What have you found is the million-dollar blind spot women entrepreneurs can't see and must have to be successful?
I find it's belief. I've been coaching and mentoring women entrepreneurs for almost 20 years, and every single time someone has a visibility issue, they have a sales issue, they have a cash flow issue, I can always trace it back to what do they believe is possible. And if you don't have the belief system of somebody who is highly successful and you're doubting yourself, you're letting fears make your growth decisions, and you're holding back from doing the things that will work because you convinced yourself you can't afford it, we can always tie it back to your belief system, a.k.a., Lisa, your mindset.
Right, but how does one up-level their belief system?
Well, I think there's a couple of roads in. You can go from the inside out or you can go from the outside in. And I'm a huge proponent of surrounding yourself with people who've already achieved the level of success you desire. That's why I host masterminds. I've actually participated in masterminds for over 35 years. Yes, I am that old. I know I don't look that old, but I am that old. And I find that from the outside in, if we infuse new thinking and we study, how do people who easily achieve high six figures, seven figures, maybe even eight figures if that's your goal, and we look at how do they make decisions, how do they conquer goals that are scaring you? Maybe you're terrified to do the thing they do easily. If they're easily hiring a team, they are the people you want to spend time with because it causes us to tap into what I call the rising tide effect. They raise your game simply by being around them.
Wow, that's awesome. Rising tide effect.
Yeah, write that one down. I know as you're listening in, you're going, oh, what is that? We probably don't have to, we can't unpack it all the way, but let's just say there is a proven concept in masterminds, being in groups of people who are highly successful, and that is by simply proximity, spending time with them, if you allow yourself to be curious and study what it is they're doing that's working, you will start to emulate the same success they have because it changes the way you think, the way you make decisions.
Wow. And AKA or the end outcome is you strengthen your belief system.
Right. So what happens with the belief system, now there's another way to do this, Lisa, and I think everybody's different, so sometimes we have to decide what's the best way for you. But if you are somebody who have a lot of fears, you have a lot of doubts, and being around highly successful people makes you want to shrink, then you've got to start from the inside out. And that means you have to look at the ideas and the beliefs and the thought patterns you have about money, about success, about help, right, support, whatever that thing is that you talk yourself out of, that's because you have a belief it's not for you. You have a thought pattern that limits you instead of expands your possibilities, and we all have them. Every single human on this planet was raised in a way that created a set of conditions that you bought into as reality. So This is the very short money mindset course today, right?
Right.
Bigger concept. But just know, like, whatever you think right now, whatever your beliefs, whatever your results, which, by the way, your results are a roadmap to your belief system, you can upgrade them at any time by learning how to make new thought patterns, to think the way successful people think, to make decisions the way successful people make them.
That's excellent. And that was just the beginning, everyone. So let's talk specifically today about common challenges that female entrepreneurs face that you obviously have helped hundreds, if not thousands. There are three particular that we spoke about, common challenges that have been noted as tough, more difficult for women. And the first and most important one that we made, however much time it takes to unpack this one, the fear of failure. Women fear failure actually more than men. Can you speak to that?
Well, and I think women feel it more because they're more aware of it. Like, most men don't talk about their fear of failure, right? They may not even admit it, even if it is there. But women, what I think a couple of things I see that happen is, one, there's those underlying belief systems where maybe they've had messages given to them as a child, who do you think you are, or you can't afford for this to not work, right? Like, whatever those messages are we grow up with, they create these thought patterns. And what happens is we buy into not being good enough, or we buy into who do I think I am, or women buy into I'm not good enough, or I'm not strong enough, or whatever it is, or I don't have enough money. And the way it translates is I'm afraid if I try and I fail, I won't be able to have my own business. Or I won't get to enjoy the financial abundance that I set my sights on. And sometimes, Lisa, maybe our listeners can relate to this one, sometimes there's a pressure from family or a mate of you have to get this right or else I need you to go get a job. So there's this added complexity, this financial pressure, and it creates this snowball of fear that paralyzes people and causes them to not take the action. So what happens is they do just enough to feel like they're moving the ball forward or they're moving the goal forward, but not enough to succeed.
There's a whole bunch we can do with that right there. We probably won't, but I must say this. The point that you made is so profound because many times when it is the male in a relationship that is the entrepreneur, even if his wife or spouse is, uncomfortable, they're still kind of supporting what that male headship is doing. But if it's the woman, kind of like what you said, they don't tend to kind of get that same support, that supportive role from their husband or mate. Wouldn't you agree?
Sometimes. I'm very blessed. I have a very supportive husband. He's like, go do your thing. Like, I believe in you. But I do have clients who've had that pressure put on them of, you got to make this work. You can't afford to have an expensive hobby. And so what happens is there's so much fear about making a misstep that they're paralyzed. And they don't really do anything enough. So we're talking about things like, are you investing enough in the right marketing and visibility strategies that propel you, or are you doing just enough because that's what you believe you can afford, and so you think you're out there, but no one can see you because you haven't done enough to really make that bold stand in the world. Or maybe you have someone, you're the kind of person where you know you need support, you need a team. There's a lot of things you're like, if I do that, like I'm exhausted or I don't know how to do it, but you don't feel like you can afford that. So you don't, and then you never really get that growth traction. So those are just a couple examples I've seen with my clients over the years.
Right. And, of course, the opposite challenge with the women with fear of failure is fear of success. Can you speak to that?
Well, so this is a really great set of opposites, right? Like, there's the part of us that doesn't want to fail, and like, what are people going to think? And then there's the part of us like, well, what if I succeed and I lose A, B, or C? So I was speaking at an event a couple years ago, and I was doing a talk on money and mindset and how they're so linked together, and I was talking about what happens when we have conflict about success. And this woman, her eyes got really big, and I could see the tears welling up, and they start to drip down her face, and she's scribbling notes, and she just has this moment. I could see her having a big moment. So afterwards, she came up to me, gave me a big hug, and she said, and Lisa, I know you'll appreciate this. She said, you just solved one of the biggest conundrums I've had. She said, I've been afraid to grow because I didn't know how to grow and have enough time to be the mom and the wife I wanted to be.
That's right.
This is where many of our extraordinary, exquisitely talented women get stuck, is because they've not done it before and they don't have the right mentor yet. They're held hostage with what they know how to do right now. And this is where that old saying of, you can't get where you're going next the same way you got to where you are today. So I had to coach this woman on how to create new strategies to scale her business that didn't look anything like how she got to that first 6 figures.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I like that. Thank you for the polar opposite explanation.
Life is full of contrast. Business is full of contrast. We can be excited to grow and we can be terrified by it, right? Like, we have to recognize that when those fears are present and we don't know how, we oftentimes put the brakes on instead of allowing that uncomfortableness to be fuel to find a creative solution.
Right, right. Melanie, you shared some information about revenues increasing from $200K to 7 figures. Was that one of your clients?
It's actually been several of my clients. There's one in particular that I was thinking of when I share that story on webinars and in my bio. But part of what that was we had to change the paradigm of how they were going to grow their business. I can say more if you want me to. I don't know how much you want me to go into that.
Yeah, no, go right ahead.
So here's where, and this goes right back hand in hand with what we were just talking about this conflict of how do I grow? And so this person came to me. This was a man. He has an online business, and at the time, this was probably about 10 years ago that this particular gentleman was working with me. He wanted to increase his revenue, but was tapped out and couldn't increase the number of hours he worked. So he's thinking, like, I can't work more hours. How on earth would I grow?
Let me jump in right there. Wow, a man that wasn't willing to increase his hours. That's impressive.
Right? Well, he was family-oriented, and he was getting ready to enter into marriage, and he knew kids were on the way, and he was working probably 60, 70 hours a week already, and he's thinking, do I increase the number of hours, or do I find a better way to grow? And that's what led him to me as his coach and mentor. So we had to flip his paradigm of how do you leverage your time and talent so you can exponentially grow the revenue. And he was, I will be honest, He was resistant at first. He didn't think it would work. I challenged him to put first we worked on an authority platform, and we got a book out that really changed the game for him in terms of visibility. And the second part was we shifted the way he delivered his programs and his entry level. And at first it went from 200,000 to 750, and then he just kept growing because he kept finding new ways to leverage. And it's something that everybody has inside their business model. It's just you're looking at your business the way you always have, so you're always going to see what's there, right? It's usually in your blind spot.
Right. That's great. And I love the word leverage.
Yeah, I call it your unique profit amplifier. We all have one, but it's usually dormant.
Gotcha. It's a hidden gem that you help them discover.
Exactly. It's already capital that's underutilized, under-optimized, and you're not amplifying it in a way that your clients can probably even experience it. So you're probably having cash flow problems. You're probably having profit problems. You're thinking like, okay, why did someone hire my competitor when I do this better? And it's because you aren't focused on the one thing that can have the greatest traction in terms of revenue and impact on your clients.
Well, this is a perfect place for this question. Reality or myth? You can triple your revenue working under 40 hours. Reality or myth?
Reality.
Okay, tell us how.
Well, there is no one-size-fits-all on this one. It's not like there's one formula. But first of all, let's go back to mindset. It starts by changing your mind about what's possible. If you go into it saying it can't be done, guess what? You're going to collect evidence of why it can't be done. I like to play games with my mind, and I always say, look, I want to work under 30 hours a week, but I want to double my revenue this year. What would have to be different? And then what happens is I eventually have the strategy revealed. And I started doing this 18 years ago when I was working 80 hours a week, okay? Like I started my business for freedom, and I ended up working way more than I ever did when I was in corporate America. I'm sure that's not news to anyone. But I had to challenge my status quo. And then the second thing is we have to look at leverage. And I'm a fan of what I call ruthless leverage. And that means don't leave any stones unturned. Don't make the decision it won't work for you until you try it. So we might look at, are you getting enough of the activities that you don't do well or that you don't have time for off your plate into someone else's hands? And are you setting up a structure that people can do for you what you don't have time or energy bandwidth to do, to grow? We might look at your offerings. Do you have the offering set that you can scale from doing them one-on-one to 1 to 1,000? Some people are like, won't work for me. I maybe have found 1 out of 40 people it can't work for them. And then we're going to look at, are you priced accordingly? Now this is a key conversation for women across the board. I look at 10 women's business, and 9 of them are undercharging because it goes back to that belief system. Is somebody really going to pay me more money to do this? And there's a few links that we have to look at between, do we have the confidence, the clarity of message, and the ability to deliver so we can raise our prices? And those are the 3 things. We have to have the right mindset, we have to have the right leverage, and we have to have the right offer in order to work less hours but expand the amount of free time, the amount of money to have profitability.
No, that's good. And that parlays us into challenge number 2 that is one of the top challenges that female entrepreneurs face, and that's not delegating. Women tend to overextend themselves. So, that's a big mistake and a challenge for women. So what would you say, Melanie, drum roll, how you can help with that challenge in their business? That mindset of, I got to do everything, working on too many things and not being able to release and delegate.
Absolutely. So again, there is a mindset piece to this, but let me start this time with a really very logic-driven solution, and that is if you run the numbers and you look at what you can make doing it yourself, and then you look at what you can make when you get some help in key areas that free you up, it's a no-brainer. I have never
I love you.
Somebody.
I love you saying that. I had a girlfriend, and her and her husband owned the business, and were doing very well. And she was still cleaning her house, and he was still mowing the lawn. And it used to drive me nuts. And so I talked to them about it. I was like, if this is a relaxation method for you, okay. But, for that hour, what is that costing you? What is your hourly rate worth? And then, what would you pay someone to do that? And are they anywhere near each other? And they're like, of course not. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't be doing it.
Well, then we go to layer 2, which once you get the price solved, right? It's like, okay, well, it's absolutely a no-brainer. If I pay somebody $20 to do this, I can make $200, $500, $1,000 an hour, right? Okay, now we've got that out of the way. Now there's the mindset of I have to be willing to let go to grow. Because what happens is people hold on to the control of it being done the way they need it to be done, and they haven't developed the muscle of basically letting go of it being perfect, because let's face it, it's never going to be perfect. But the second piece is they haven't been willing to create the systems and the like the procedures and things like that so that someone else has the best chance of getting it 99% right. And those two have to go hand in hand. And I think that terrifies a lot of people because they're like, I don't even know how I do it. How would I teach someone else to do it? And that's not the way we want to look at it. Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4-Hour Workweek, had a great quote, and he said, your job is not to do it all. Your job is to let go of the things that someone else can do so you can focus on the bigger fish, the bigger goal, the bigger vision of what's possible.
Love it. And I'm actually in the future working on the 30-hour work week for women. And I'm compiling.
That's a little more realistic.
Yeah. And I actually plan to compile, things that women who are working 30 hours or less than 6 to 7 figures are doing. So, yes, people can kind of wrap their mind around a 30-hour work week. That 4-hour, you got to just have a belief system for it, right?
Right. And the 4-hour work week was never meant to be realistic. It was meant to be a catchy title. 30 hours is realistic, and that's about what I work and have worked for probably the last 14, 15 years.
That's excellent. Congratulations. Work-life balance, right? Just real quickly, there have been so many highly successful 6-7-figure women from industry to entrepreneurship that, Marie Menounos and just on that have had a health challenge that has really made them draw back and relook at things and bring down those 60 and 70-hour work weeks. It's not good for our health, as women particularly.
I would agree. I faced it. It's actually one of the things that I think is, I don't want to say it's part of my brand, but I think it's what connects and bonds me with a lot of women is I've been very transparent about a lot of the health challenges I've experienced over the last 10 years. And part of the reason I went to a 30-hour week is I was dealing with some chronic fatigue issues, and I needed to find a different way to grow and expand and be successful. And what I find is that people have no problem sacrificing their health to build their wealth. But then when it takes sacrificing their wealth to rebuild their health, they're completely freaked out by it.
Yep.
And we have it all backwards. I'm a firm believer in building a business that's sustainable, that's aligned with the things that give you power, not take your power. And that's what makes a growth opportunity sustainable, because many times, and I was just on a coaching call with a group the other day where someone was talking about they built this mastermind and it was all wrong and they hated it and it burned them out and it gave them exhaustion, and And what happened was they just saw somebody else's coaching model and said, I'll build that. They had no idea if it was aligned with what they needed and wanted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's prevalent. And I think the way that we take back our health, I don't know that there's balance, but I do know that we can prioritize. And we can get really, really clear about what is important to us and then build our business to deliver that.
Yes. And I've actually done something very similar. I've been walking through a very difficult health challenge, and I have taken some steps back to move forward in a more effective way. So I agree with you completely with that.
Yeah, it's an epidemic, I would say. Yeah.
The hustle and grind. As a matter of fact, I have a new initiative that I'm launching called the Smart Hustle, Smart Grind for Women. And the tagline is how to succeed in business and life without having to compete and without working yourself to death.
Yay.
Yeah. So it's the Smart Hustle system. But so this is awesome. We have talked about two of the challenges. The mistake that women have made about delegating. Now let's talk about a misconception. There's a misconception, and it's right in line with what we're talking about, that we need to be super women to be successful. But you actually say that it prevents us from being successful.
Well, I call it superhero syndrome. And the way I see this happen is we're, most of us, very high achievers. Women in general tend to believe they can multitask, right? It's like they think, I can do all these things at once. Mm-hmm. We have no shortage of brilliant ideas. And then we want to do it all at one time. So everything becomes equally important in our brain. So the next thing you know, there's overwhelm. There's dropped deadlines. There's missed deliverables. There's unhappy people who didn't get their expectations met. And the worst is, as a superwoman, you feel like you are not moving very fast. As a matter of fact, you feel like you're probably going in reverse. And that's superhero syndrome. We've taken on way more than we need to do. I believe the remedy is to lean into your superpowers and simplify your approach. One of my mantras, and it was my theme of the year for many years, was simplify to multiply. When you simplify your focus and you really hone in on the one or two things that are your unique profit amplifiers, then you can exponentially grow the results. When you're spread thin and you're trying to do too many things, let's face it, we all know we do this, we don't do any of them well. You know, you're trying to feed your kids dinner, but you're on your phone, and at the same time, you're writing out your to-do list, and then you go back and look at the to-do list, you're like, what did I even say? None of that makes sense. You realize you texted the wrong thing to the person on the phone, and you told your kids they could go play 7 hours of Nintendo when they got done with dinner, right? Like, we're not present. And that means we're not effective. We're not moving anything forward very well. So I say, figure out what your unique profit amplifier is. Know what supercharges you. Do that, and do that really well.
That's great. Can you just name two more misconceptions women particularly have about success that isn't necessarily true?
Well, I think a big misconception, and let's take it from success to wealth. I think women, as a rule, tend to believe that wealth will make you a bad person, or it will somehow erode your heart-based desire to make a difference in the world. And that's because somewhere in our life we've collapsed having wealth with people making decisions that hurt people to be more profitable, right? We see that a lot in the news. I believe that one of our jobs as women is to expand the definition of wealth and prosperity to we do more good when we have more affluence to invest in the good work we want to do in the world. I feel like it's our birthright to have it, and it's an important role we have, because as creative forces on this planet, women are the creative forces. We have the unique ability to shift the paradigm of prosperity and to shift the balance of power from more ego-driven to more heart-based. I truly believe that we as women can do that. So I think that's a common misconception. And I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but I want to go deeper on it. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of women think no one's going to do it as good as I can, and they hold themselves hostage in a very small level of success because they don't have the support they need to grow. Mm-hmm. Or even deeper, they believe they can't afford to invest in the support they really need, whether that's mentoring or that's like a marketing consultant or it's an assistant, someone to run their coaching program for them, whatever that is. I think a lot of times women decide they don't have the money instead of challenging themselves to raise their financial game so they can afford the business growth they need.
Love it, love it. You also mentioned something else that stood out to me. You said that you work with entrepreneurs and help them build a business around their expertise. Is that what you did for yourself? How did you get this coaching consulting bug?
Well, okay, so the coaching consulting bug really was born out of my corporate career path. I was kind of like an entrepreneurial inside this Fortune 500 company in the sense that they kept putting me on the hot spots of, this is broken, tell us how we fix it. This is not meeting our clients' needs. How do we understand what our clients really want and deliver that better? So I kept getting put in these problem-solving roles. How do we achieve crazy goals in record time? And I realized that one of my natural gifts was I could inspire other people to accomplish things they never knew was possible. And that was a really great correlation to coaching. And so there became a moment when I decided I wanted out of corporate, and I'm like, I'm not marketable. Like, I don't know how to go get another job. And I realized there was a whole industry of coaching that grabbed my heart, and I actually have a certification as a business coach, and then took more advanced. I use neurolinguistic programming as a tool, which is a results coaching technique, and so I just got really passionate about it, and that's what gave me the bug. Was I started to see when I use very specific tools and very specific questions, I can move someone who's been paralyzed for years into results they didn't even know they could achieve.
Wow, excellent. And so that's your bug, and I gave you a mouthful. Talk to me about how you help entrepreneurs build a business around their expertise. That word "around" stood out for me.
Well, let's go back to something I mentioned earlier, and that is I think sometimes when you start to realize you're going to build a business, you're going to start a business, whether it's in the service industry or maybe you're looking into online business models or you've got some kind of product you want to create, whatever that is, people tend to look around and say, who's doing something similar? And they try to emulate that. But what happens is it's not necessarily around your own strengths. And this is where burnout comes from. When you build a business that's not based on your strengths, you will get burned out because now you're having to spend hours and hours and hours doing something that doesn't light your fire. And you can only keep the fire going so long if it's not stoked. So the way I do it is when I'm mentoring people, whether it's in my 12-month Amplify Mastermind or I do a strategy session with people sometimes and just give them a jump start. We look at what are the core things you do well, what does work, and how do we get more of that in your business with the least amount of effort. And because I've been doing it for 20 years, Lisa, I kind of like, I have this superpower myself of being able to recognize it and hone in, and I know what questions to ask to get the juice from my client. But it starts with having a new conversation. You can't look at how do I get one step forward. You have to look at how do I take a big leap. And when we look at taking big leap, I call it owning your bold, like really like owning this bold move you want to make. You cannot look at growth the same way ever again. What most of us do is we're just looking at, like, how do I get the next 10K in the door? How do I get the next project out the door? How do I just shuffle it forward a little bit, right? When you start looking at taking leaps, you have to change the way you approach your goals. And that means you have to evolve and expand your capacity for rapid growth. That's not for everybody. Some people really like slow growth. They want to control every movement, and they are not people who are comfortable with those kind of accelerated processes. That means I got to coach that person a little differently. But most people appreciate that I can get them in a 90-day range. We can really double and triple the revenue, and that's one of the things I got known for pretty early on.
Is there an industry type or business professional, entrepreneur that you can help the most?
Well, I think people who are building a business around their expertise is probably my first passion, and that's because I know this industry inside and out. So if you've got a process or you have a service that you deliver, a lot of times it's authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, trainers, that type of business is super easy. But, I've worked with yoga studios and fitness studios. I've worked with mortgage broker owners. Part of it is just really understanding what is your unique selling proposition. What is the thing, I call it your bold influence formula. What is the thing when you do it, it like turns the lights on in your potential client and they go, I need you. And when you understand that, everything pivots, everything shifts. And instead of chasing business, business is chasing you.
I love I need you. So
that's what we want, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. Sure. Right. And again, I have one of my first books was How to Get Published and Grow Your Business and Become the Hunted, Not the Hunter. So yeah, we don't want to be hunting. We want to be hunted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or lovingly stalked.
Lovingly stalked. That sounds much better. Yes. So, Melanie, you have an awesome resume, if you will. You've been featured in Bloomberg Businessweek, Women's Day, Parenting, and other publications. You serve on the Women's Speaker Association executive team, and you're a member of the Association of Transformational Leaders. You also, obviously have your podcast, and you mentioned that you hosting your podcast became a business development tool. It sounds like it kind of parlayed into that. Can you speak to that?
Well, this is my second podcast, but I've been doing this kind of interview format since, back in the day it was recording calls and sending them on CDs. Gosh, I was grateful for podcasting. A lot cheaper to deliver.
Right.
I think this is a two-parter. First of all is understanding that people listen to podcasts to entertain themselves when they're commuting, they're on their walk, they're at the gym, right? Like podcasting is rapidly becoming the number one content consumption platform on the planet. And there's some statistics I don't have in front of me, but they're mind-blowing. Something like 27% of people who drive every day are listening to podcasts on the road, and that has steadily been growing every year. So
especially with the new car dashboards having the podcast icon touch. Yes, Apple
Play is or CarPlay, they call it. Yes, which I have. So it makes it super easy and simple. The second thing you have to remember is in that environment, you have a captive audience, which means you are building a relationship with this person who's listening to you because they're listening to you over and over and over again. So you're building rapport and connection with your potential client. Now add on top of that the idea, just like a book, when you host your own podcast, your authority and your credibility is rising in the eyes of the people who see you as the host. So it's a subtle an influence positioning tool. You gain the influence by hosting, and guesting is great, but when you're the host, you are in the influence seat. And all these things combined means if you're doing a good job with your positioning of your topics and the way you get your podcast out in front of your ideal audience, you should be getting clients and opportunity. So sometimes for some people, you open that podcast and you're consistent with it, you're going to start attracting more people to your list, and they're going to be curious. They're going to come to you and want you to be the person who solves the problem. But you're also being heard by other people who want you on their stages. And so now you have created an opportunity tsunami if you're doing this right.
Excellent. Well, before we close, I always like to make sure that I share this point. Millennials and I have something in common, and I know you do too. We both believe in fulfilling personal social responsibility and working with companies that give back. Millennials are huge about working with a company that gives back. How do you give back, Melanie, as an individual or as a company?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. I've been a supporter of an organization called Unstoppable Foundation for probably over 10 years now. So as a company and as a family, we are very supportive of them. And there's a couple other organizations that we do that with. I have a huge affinity for education and the arts. So we've been very active over the years with the Waldorf school system and some of the local schools who have really struggled with keeping their funding for the arts because we truly see it transforming the creative force inside of our youth. And done well, these programs actually keep kids off the street and keep them from being troublemakers. And, you know, like they have a creative way to express what maybe is going on inside of them. So I'm very active in a few of our local community programs, especially inside the school that my husband's son went to. It was a very passionate opportunity for him, and so we keep giving back into that environment as well.
Well, thank you for your giving back.
Thank you.
And can you quickly tell our audience in closing, and specifically female business owners, why is it important to hire a coach and not just any coach?
I think there is a difference between a coach and a mentor, and you need to know the difference. And I think the reason why every woman on this planet should have her own coach is because you cannot see inside yourself what's possible the way a good coach can see what you're capable of and help you extract that. And that is the biggest difference between a coach and a mentor. Mentors teach you what to do because they did it, but a coach is going to pull out of you what's unique in your superpowers and your strengths and help you expand your business because you're leaning into those. And I think every woman who has a coach is supercharged out there in the market.
That's great advice. So how can we find out more about you, Melanie, and the work you do?
Absolutely. Come to my website, MelanieBenson.com. And if you go to MelanieBenson.com/business innovators, I have a free resource for your listeners, Lisa.
Yay.
We're going to set up something special for you there. And it's going to help you understand how you show up with money and success, where your profit amplifier hidden drains are, and how to actually shift it quickly so you can start bringing in more profitability.
I love the hidden drains. All right. We'll make sure we have that link in the show notes.
Great.
So,
thank you so much, and thanks for listening in.
Absolutely. Thank you. So if you are a female service provider, coach, consultant, author, speaker, and want more control over the hours you work and your income potential and growth, be sure to check out the work Melanie is doing. And as I always say in closing, lead with value, and the resources, relationships, and revenue will follow.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.